the first time you felt rich? I was 6 years old. It must have been right after Christmas or right after my birthday or something, because I had a wad of cash. And you know what I did with that wad of cash? I rolled it up and I put a rubber band around it. You know why I did that? That's what the guy at the gas station did. It's true. Remember, I know I'm digging way back into ancient history here, but remember that you go back to the gas station and you didn't serve yourself. A guy came out and, pumped gas for you. Well, you would do that. I remember looking out the back window of the Monte Carlo and seeing the guy with the wad of cash. My dad would, put $20 out the window, and his guy would pull out this wad of cash, take a rubber band off, and pull out, $5 change and give it back to him. And that's, so I thought, everybody who has a wad of cash, that's how you do it. You roll it up and put a rubber band around it. So I did that, and then I did something special with it. I hid it in my room. I hid it in a book, which really wasn't a book. It was a secret book. You ever see those books? You pull it out, it looks like a book, open up, it's not a book. Oh, yeah, I had one of those. And inside were all these little compartments I could put my treasures. I had like my tie tack my grandpa gave me. I had a couple of dice I found somewhere that weren't even to one of our games. I just found them, but they were special. I had a stack of Kennywood tickets. Remember when Kennywood had tickets, right? They came in groups of 6. You put them in your tube socks when you were running around the park, and then 2 tickets for the kangaroo ride, yeah. So I had some tickets from the previous summer in there. I had all my treasures in my fake book, right? So my wad of cash went into my fake book. Then I closed it up and I put it on my shelf. I was so rich, I couldn't keep it to myself. So I said to my best friend Jamie one day, I said, Jamie, come on, I got to show you this. And Jamie came into my bedroom, and I pulled my fake book off and opened it up. He says, oh, that's not a book. I said, I know. How cool is that? And I pulled out this wad of cash, and I took the rubber band off, and I started counting them out one at a time, because they're all $1 bills, right? 1, 2, 3. I just kept going and kept going and kept going the whole way up to 6. Because that's what I had. I had $6. And I said, Jamie, can you believe it? I am so rich. He said, man, Rich, you're rich. I remember feeling so rich that day. I have felt rich other days in my life too. When I got my paper out and I started making $30 a month, I felt so rich. And then I started working at the golf course. I made $6.50 an hour. I felt so rich. And then when I had my very first church as the pastor down in South Georgia, I started out, and after 5 years, I'd worked up to a level where my salary was $27,000 was what I got up to. And I felt so rich. But I discovered something since then. Rich is relative. Rich is relative. I make more money now than I've ever made or ever dreamt of making in my life. And you know what? I don't feel rich. I don't. I look around. I see you. I see people in our community. I see people around our area. I don't feel rich anymore. But when I went to Uganda a few years ago, it all came back to me. I felt rich. They thought I was rich. They think all Americans are rich. How many of y'all have a car? You're rich in Ugandans. And in fact, if you've got 2 cars, just forget about it. You're just downright wealthy. Oh, you have a house? Wow. You're rich. Oh, you have food to eat tomorrow? You're rich. You have more than 2 sets of clothes that are all yours? You're rich. See, rich is relative. We don't feel rich looking around at each other because, someone's got a nicer car than I do, or more clothes than you do, or this or that. We don't feel rich because rich is relative. But did you know that if as a household, if your family makes $33,000 or more a year, you are in the 1% club? You are part of the richest 1% of the people in the world. How does it feel to be in the club? 1%ers. It's pretty impressive, y'all. I don't know if that's everybody in this room, but I think it's probably most of us. We're the 1%ers. You and I are rich. So I came back from Uganda on that trip, and I came back right about the time it was my birthday, and my family had planned some really special stuff. They were super excited, and they took me out to dinner. I was just a passenger in the car. They took me out to dinner at the restaurant, which is super great. They said, we got another place we're going, so I hopped back in the passenger side, and they just drove me where they wanted to take me, and we ended up in the parking lot of Dick's Sporting Goods. I said, what are we doing here? Marsha's like smiling, just follow me. So I followed her in the store, and the kids are around me, and she walks right back to where all the kayaks are. I'm like, oh, kayak, because I've been planning. I've been wanting a kayak my whole life, forever. And the last 2 years, I've been talking about it, thinking about it, strategy. How can I buy a kayak? I want a kayak. And Marsha's looking back, this whole wall of kayaks, and she's like, pick one. Like, not from the far end, they're expensive, stay on this end, but pick one. All right, because there's a whole wall, and the further you go, they keep adding up in money. So she said, pick one. In fact, we're going to buy two because we wanted to make this a family adventure. We wanted to make this a family activity we could continue doing together. And she said, we kind of have our idea on the low end one over here, but you can go like 3 or 4 over if you want. You can pick one. And I'm like, wow. And I put my hand on all these kayaks walking by, to that certain point, and had to walk back. And that's when it hit me. I turned to Marsha. I said, baby, I am so thankful for this, but I cannot do it. She's like, what? I said, I cannot do it. This is your birthday. We've been planning this. This is your gift from us, your family, because we love you. I said, I know that. I know you love me. But I met some new people I love too in Uganda, and they don't know if they're going to have food to eat tomorrow. And my heart could not justify picking a kayak off the rack and making it mine. Those trips will change you. Listen, it's not wrong to have a kayak. If you got a kayak, don't be thinking, I got to go sell my kayak. Dang it. Should not have gone to church today. It's okay to have stuff, but listen, let me just say this. Your possessions, your money, like your wad of cash, whatever that looks like, if it's wound up with a rubber band or it's in the bank or it's in stocks, whatever, your wad of cash, your money, and your car and your home and your clothes, they will look like, your possessions will show what the world values, or they will show what Jesus values. Your possessions will show what the world values or what Jesus values. Listen, God never says don't be rich. In fact, God commends you for working hard. He commends you for earning what you earn. So listen, having money isn't the problem. Hoarding it is the problem. Having money is not the problem. Hoarding money is the problem. This is why the writer to the Hebrews said it this way. This is Hebrews 13:5. He said, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God said, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. Why do we put so much trust in things that rust? Why do we bank so much on things that will not last? Things we cannot take with us, things that will not be ours someday. Whatever you're saving, guess what? It's not going to be yours someday. And the reality is, it never really was. But why do we continue to do that? God says, put your trust in me. I won't leave you. I don't rust. I don't decay. I don't go away. I'm here forever. Trust me. Trust me. But here's a challenge. I worked hard for what I earned. I worked hard for my money, and you do too. That $6 when I was a kid, that doesn't count because that was probably a birthday gift. But my paper route, every day at 2:30, those papers were delivered to my green barrel out in front of my house. And I can remember how many games I had to walk. I had to leave my place in the batting order and go fill my paper bag with those papers and strap them onto the front of my BMX bicycle and start riding the neighborhood for the rest of the afternoon. Or trudging through snowdrifts, door to door to door. I worked hard for $1 a day. And when I went to the golf course, man, I was that kid. I was that kid when all my friends were enjoying their summer off, enjoying their summer break, when they were getting home from school and didn't have to do anything else. I was a kid every summer morning, 9th grader, getting up and being at the golf course by 6 or 7 o'clock every morning and working hard. I used to come home thinking I was born with a weed eater in my hands. I would come home vibrating because I'd done that for 8 hours. I worked 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Hard labor. I worked hard. Listen, every church I've ever served, I've given everything I've had. I have never slouched. Ron, you understand what that's like. You serve the church with every ounce of strength you've got. I've worked hard for my money. And so sometimes I'm tempted to think to myself, it's my money. I earned it. I can do with it what I want. Can I just remind us this morning that God has a different perspective? God says, you know what, Rich? I gave you that job, and I gave you that job. I gave you that job. In fact, every paycheck you've ever received was a gift from me to you. And by the way, it's all mine, Rich. I'm going to let you keep 90% of it, and I'll just take back 10. That's a deal, right? Some of us are like, I have to give 10%. No, you get to keep 90%. That's a pretty great perspective. God gives you a better deal than anyone else I know. The reality is it's not wrong to make money. It's just wrong to hoard money. God is concerned not that you're making lots of money, but what you do with that money. In fact, listen to this. This is written by James, the brother of Jesus. James, who was the pastor of First Church Jerusalem. And when I say First Church Jerusalem, I'm not kidding. It was the first church, period. This was the church as it started out. No denominations, just the church. And he was the pastor of it. James, the guy who didn't even believe in Jesus, who mocked Jesus when they were brothers growing up, who didn't believe Jesus was who he said he was until Jesus rose from the dead. And then James became a believer. So strongly became the leader of the first church in Jerusalem. And I want you to hear what he wrote to his church, to his people in Jerusalem, and even those who are scattered abroad. If you've got your Bible app, just swipe onto James 5, verses 1 through 6. We'll walk through part of that. James 5, verses 1 through 6. Here's how he begins, verse 1. Now listen, you rich people. He's talking to us. Hey, 1%ers, he's talking to us. He's also writing to the people who were there in his church and spread around that area who were financially wealthy. People who loved being wealthy. They loved their long flowing robes, and they had the biggest houses and the most sporty model of camel you could get in the market. They had it all. And they loved it. They loved to show it off. They loved to show what they and their world valued. They loved their stuff. But listen to what James writes. Now listen, you rich people, and jump to verse 2. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. He's saying it's not going to last. What you're counting on, what you're placing your trust in, it's going to corrode, it's going to rust. I love how one pastor put it. He said it this way. He said, start giving while you're living, because what you're holding is molding. Start giving while you're living, because what you're holding is molding. I'm so guilty of this. But you ever have some bread, you couldn't wait to make a sandwich, and you're, man, I'm going to use this bread tomorrow to make that sandwich. Then you go to your bread drawer and you pull the bread out and it's molded. It's like, dang, I waited too long. That's what James is saying. That stuff simply is not going to last. It wasn't wrong to earn it. It was just wrong to hoard it. Jump down to verse 5. He keeps writing to the rich people. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. What does that mean? What is he trying to tell us? I love Andy Stanley's explanation of this. Let me steal this from Andy for a moment. You know, back in the day, back in the time period, the culture where James was writing this, they didn't have many foods that would last. Grain and wine was about it. But they also knew that they had to have food at certain times. They knew celebrations were coming up, weddings would happen, all opportunities when they would need extra food, like this coming weekend, right? What is Thursday? Thanksgiving. And you know what you're going to do, right? You're going to go online and buy a turkey, or go to the store and stand in line and buy a turkey. And you're going to get the 14-pounder, you're going to bring it home, and probably today you're going to start thawing that thing out, and that's just at your disposal because you can do that super easy. And then you're going to find out, probably like tomorrow, that one of your kooky cousins is bringing 7 extra people to your house. And that 14-pounder is not going to be enough, and so you got to go get another 10-pounder, and you can do that because it's right there. They didn't have that luxury. They didn't have food that they could preserve and freeze and last like that. So they had to find other ways to plan ahead. And so here's what some people did. The people that had cattle, they would take one calf, They let all the other cattle, all the other calves just go and do what they need to do, but they took one calf and they brought it over and they set it aside and they put it in a special paddock or pasture, and it got all the good grain. It got all the best hay. It got all the fresh water. It got the best grazing areas of grass, and they fattened it up. And for that calf, it's like, I think I won the lottery until the day comes. And it's taken back behind the barn. And all the other cattle are like, I'm sure glad I'm not that one, right? They would fatten up this calf, and then when the wedding came, the prodigal came home, or the town celebration was going to take place, you go and you kill the fattened calf. And all that stuff has been storing up and hoarding to itself, doesn't serve it any more at all. And James is saying, hey, rich people, you're just like that. God's okay with you earning it. He's just not okay with you hoarding it. So let's switch gears. So if that's what we're not supposed to do as God's people, if we're not supposed to be that as the church, what's a good picture of the church? Well, let me show you this, because even before that early day of the church, there were earlier days of the church when the church got it right, when the church was doing the right thing with what they had. And this is written to us from a guy named Luke. Luke was one of the guys who just wrote not only the Gospel of Luke, but he also wrote for us the book of Acts. And the book of Acts is he's just recording things that were happening in the earliest days of the church. And here's what he writes. Acts chapter 4, again, swipe over to Acts chapter 4, verses 32 through 35. He begins, all the believers, all the Jesus followers, all the people who have surrendered their lives to Jesus, all those who had said, I'm all in, I'm yours, I'm giving my life to you. All the believers were one in heart and mind. And get this, no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own. Think about that for a second. Try that with your teenager. Try that with your 2-year-old. Sometimes it's the same, I don't know. They didn't claim anything as their own, but everything they owned, they did this with. They shared everything they had. Verse 34. There were no needy persons among them, for from time to time those who owned lands or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone as he had need. They already lived by tithing. That was their culture. That was the way of living. They tithed 1% of everything they made. They tithed, that's that 10% we talked about a few moments ago. That was given. But then they did this, above and beyond. From time to time. Oh, there's some people in need over here. They have physical needs and they don't know how to follow Jesus yet. I have a house. I don't need it. I'm going to sell it. And by the way, apostles, here's all the money from it. Take it and use it. That's what they did. This is a picture of the church getting it right. When they committed their lives to Jesus, they committed their possessions to his purpose. And you know what happened? The church grew. More and more people came to know Jesus as Savior, and the kingdom expanded. The church thrived. It tells us every single day more and more and more people were being won into the saving grace of Jesus Christ. I'm going to invite Larry and Shirlene Johnson to come to the front for a moment. We've been talking about taking ground, and we've been talking, about looking back at the early church, but I want to give you a picture of what it looks like today. What would it look like if individuals or families or us as a church, if we got together and said, let's start doing what God tells us to do? What does that even look like? Well, I'm so thankful for Larry and Shirlene because they are going to help us understand that this morning. I didn't give that to him on purpose. It's just I know who's speaking first. Hey, Larry and Shirlene, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation today. I know that you've just come back from a pretty recent trip to Jamaica, which I know was a really awesome trip. But tell us, what did y'all do when you were in Jamaica?
Well, what we do in Jamaica is we partner with a group out of Du Bois, PA, called One by One to Jamaica. And they have been in the Harmons Valleys of Jamaica for about 28 years. Mm-hmm. And we go down with the group, and we build a house. Now, this house is 14 by 11, or 154 square feet, which is about a quarter of this stage, if we're lucky. Mm-hmm. And up to sometimes, I was told, they put 8 family members in this house. We also built 2 foundations that week for future houses. We helped the clothes we donated that we took down. We helped separate those at the Blessing House for sale to the Jamaicans in that area. We helped build an education center, which they will use to further education and do some things with the children in that area. We taught at the schools, physical ed, and some reading classes. And we also did with faith walks throughout the community with a gentleman who led that from the area called Big Man.
Great. Thank you for that, Larry. And Charlene, I know you've been to Uganda several times. We have to keep holding you back so you won't move there permanently. But you've also been out to Jamaica twice. You've seen these other cultures. They're not like our culture at all. What are living conditions like when you do go over there?
I will tell you, I believe that Uganda is has a lot more poverty than where we were in Jamaica, but neither one have running water, electricity. They live day by day, not knowing where their food's going to come. Education, it just doesn't happen unless they have sponsors. And this church is instrumental in. We built I don't know if you all know, but we built a church there. God built it through all of us. And we partner with that church even today. And God is doing amazing things through the Ugandans and also through the Jamaicans. And I'd love to tell you all about it someday, but I need a couple hours, so I know I only have 4 minutes, so I'll be quiet.
You were supposed to say the 4-minute part.
Sorry. Probably down to 2.
But even when we were there together, I remember families sent their kids. I'm talking, they sent their kids on their own to come to the church right there in Mukono. 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, just coming on their own because they knew that day then their kids would have food. Yeah, that's how it is there in
Uganda. And medical care. We would take care of the medically.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And they're learning about Jesus every step of the way.
For sure.
So y'all have been on a lot of trips, and it just seems to me that all the money you've spent getting there and investing in these good folks, our brothers and sisters in Jamaica, in Mukono, Uganda, you could have saved a lot of money for yourselves. Like, Larry, you could have a bass boat by now. You could be doing all kinds of fun stuff. Charlene, y'all could be flying to see your grandkids, not driving every time. But instead, you've chosen to take what God has poured into you and to invest it back in the lives of some really, really needy people. This last trip to Jamaica, you heard a story about a young lady that really caught your heart. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Anytime, anywhere we go, we're touched with the children of all ages, and we know that what they need is education to get out of the slump that they're in, and this is where this church plays a vital role in the members of the teams that we've taken. Many of us that have gone before, we've sponsored children of all ages, and some of us continue to do so, and it is such a blessing to do that. But when we were gone in Jamaica, the change that we collect once a month at the end, the last Saturday and Sunday of the month, your little bit of coin that you might think, oh, I'm just at the bottom of my purse, does amazing things. We have partnered. We have put a young man through seminary in Uganda. He's now the associate pastor at Mount Olives United Methodist Church. There are so many we put through school. But what we decided to do as a team, we found a young woman that needed sponsored for maybe 12 to 14 months left. Her sponsor dropped out, which means she would drop out of college. So we got together as team members, and we are putting Chantel, you all are, and we all are, as a family, putting her through school to finish her education. And she is majoring in plant and science and agriculture, but she is going to put a greenhouse, it's her dream, in Harmons Valley to provide food for the families in that valley. So thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. And I thank this church for its heart for mission, because without your gifts and your offerings and your tithes, we would never be able to go on all these trips. This church is awesome. And by the way, if you ever want to listen to what God's telling you, I didn't listen for a very long time in my life. So I was 52 before I took my first mission trip. So I'm really envious of all the young people that get to go at such a young age. But be careful if you ask God where to lead you, because you might be going to Uganda or Jamaica.
And I was 60 before I listened. But what I wanted to finish with, when we're down in Jamaica, the people, one by one, they emphasize to us that the work will get done because they hire Jamaicans and we work beside them to get the work done. But what they emphasize is becoming and going out and getting relationships with the people of that area. so they know that there are people in different parts of the world that really care for them. And they know. We go back every year. We're going to have a trip going back every year. And a gentleman I mentioned, big man, he's in his mid-30s, and he used to work a physical job with One by One, and he had heart health problems. And what they did is they brought him back on as a spiritual director. And he's in his mid-30s, and he learned to read 4 years ago. And his book of choice is the Bible. And he knows it from back to back to cover. It's amazing. You ask the question, and he knows exactly where to go. So, it is truly amazing some of the people we work down there with. And thank you.
Amen. Thank Larry and Charlene. They are making a difference in the world because they've chosen not to hoard, but to help. And friends, the reality is some of you are never going to get on a plane and go spend 2 or 3 weeks in Uganda, or you're never going to get on a plane and go down and spend a week or two in Jamaica. So what about local? What can we be doing right around here? Let me invite Crystal Novak back up to the front. Crystal, thanks for being on worship team this morning and leading us in worship, but also thanks for coming up to share some ministry that you're involved in. Crystal was part of a team from this church who are spearheading a fairly new ministry. Welcome, Crystal. Fairly new ministry called Be the Light. And they are taking on, they're squaring off, facing off against human trafficking right here. And so we're going to ask you a couple questions about that today. Again, thank you for making this a part of our worship experience. But Crystal, how did you even get started in human trafficking ministry?
About a year ago, God was really trying to pull my attention to different things, and I would notice the news would be on, and it would get extremely loud, or I would be on the computer, and a bunch of news stories would start popping up on my computer. So the one thing they all had in common was they were all human trafficking stories. I knew nothing about human trafficking, and after researching it, I started to notice that once the victims are entered into this kind of lifestyle, they have a 1% to 2% chance of ever getting rescued out of it. And every 30 seconds, a child is sold into slavery. And this is, like, hearing that as a mother just broke my heart. And I knew, and I could feel God telling me that I needed to take action, and I needed to take action now. And just by doing that first step in his plan, he has opened doors for myself, for my team, in ways we can't even explain.
Crystal, I'm so proud of you for your mama's heart reacting. When you hear statistics like that we're talking about children and teenagers who are being taken and snatched, who are being put into human trafficking for all kinds of things, and they only have a 1% or 2% chance of ever being rescued once they're in. And every 30 seconds, another one is taken.
That's correct, yes.
Wow. When I think of human trafficking, I think of other parts of the world. So how prevalent is it in our country, even closer to home for us?
The United States is ranked second in the world for human trafficking. Pennsylvania is actually listed as 7th in the states. A lot of people are surprised to hear that human trafficking is happening in our very own backyards. A lot of us are familiar with the Smithton truck stop right off the turnpike. That is a big area where trafficking is actually happening. It's just being disguised as prostitution. Also, the yellow signs that you've been seeing on the telephone poles offering $15 an hour for jobs, that is a scare tactic to get these kids to call and get all the information they need to groom your children. And Pennsylvania is listed under a state of emergency for the opioid crisis happening. And what we're seeing is that the more drugs that are moving into this area, the more trafficking is happening, because it's working hand in hand.
Yeah. So we're facing this real travesty in our culture right here, right around us. So what is Be the Light doing? How is Be the Light making an impact?
We continue to educate the medical community, such as Carlow University nursing students, Highmark, and Excella Health. And they're key people to educate in this because they're the first and only people who can directly intercede in human trafficking. We've placed survivor bags in all the Excella hospitals to be given to survivors, and we continue to educate the community. This coming new year, we plan to take ground and push very hard to educate in all schools and churches for our youth, because the reality is that our youth are the ones that are infected by this, and they need empowered to fight back.
Amen. So Crystal, we look out here. We got a couple hundred, 300, 250, 300 people here today. What do we do as a church? How can we be involved?
I think the first thing, you have to value people enough to want to provide the help. When you see something, you say something. Don't hesitate to report tips or to seek help. And I know you guys think this is scary. It is scary. I'm afraid too, but God guides you. You may feel like you're not qualified to do this. I wasn't qualified. My team of 6 wasn't qualified, but He will push you through. And just remember that God never calls the qualified. He qualifies the called.
Crystal, thank you so much for making a difference in so many lives. Friends, what you've just seen are 2 examples of what it looks like when the church is doing what we're supposed to do. You know, for the last number of weeks, we've been talking about this one fund and building a budget and building a building, and the reality is, it's not about building a budget. It's not about building a building. It's about providing for ministries like we've just talked about. It's about providing for venues for God's Holy Spirit to be working in people's lives to rescue them, not just things in this world, but for eternity. Our hope is, as we move into the next number of years in the life of this church, that never stops. We continue to reach out more and more, because this is the vision statement of Community Church, to follow Jesus and to lead others to Him. And we've found 6 words we use to surround that. You know, worship, grow, serve are those first 3, kind of what we do inside. But these last 3 words, love, lead, launch, that's us being the church in the world. We love people like Jesus. We lead people to Jesus. We launch people in ministry for Jesus. That's what the One Fund is about. It's funding a vision that God has laid on the heart of the leadership and staff of this church to say, go win the world. Stop taking cover. Start taking ground. So with that in mind, let me ask you a question. What if? What if what you own doesn't look like what the world values? But instead, what if what you own looks like what Jesus values? Friends, we can win our world. Jesus is winning already. He's winning in this church every single day. He's taking ground in us. But every single day, He wants to take more ground through us. We have a world around us waiting to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Remember that number? 63,500 people within a 10-mile radius of us who have no meaningful relationship with Jesus Christ. You know what God's saying? Hey, Community Church, go get them.